Hi, I'm Tallis Barker from waterfasting.org, and today I'd like to deal with possibly the most fundamental question there is concerning water fasting, and that is water fasting safe? There's so much fear, misinformation out there concerning with water fasting. Ultimately things like, if you water fast, you will die. It will destroy your body. All sorts of crazy things. And it is possible to die during a water fast. It is also possible to die when you're asleep. It's possible to die when you're walking across the street. Is life safe? I mean, we might ask that question ultimately. But seriously, when you get down to the nitty-gritty, if you have any fundamental fears like this, my first suggestion would be to simply Google water fast death. Combine the two search terms, see what comes up. And what you'll get is basically nothing. There are one or two documented concrete cases where, historically speaking, nothing nowadays, when something went wrong, the fast was conducted badly, we were dealing with incredibly long fasts of several months. You can find one or two isolated cases. Yes, it's true. Besides that, though, all you'll find is again, misinformation. You'll find just water fasting is dangerous with no substantiation. You'll find things like horror stories here, horror stories there, but again, no concrete evidence really. So ultimately, when you look at it, fasting is safe for the vast, vast, vast majority of people. It's built into our very DNA, you might say. Ever since humans appeared on the scene a couple of millions of years ago, we've been fasting. Until modern society enabled the possibility of just a constant supply of food, there were times when we ate, and there were times when we didn't eat. And of course, when we weren't eating effectively, we were fasting. Now, for anyone who really believes that fasting might be dangerous, think about it like this. If fasting were dangerous, evolution would have weeded those people out. Maybe it did, I don't know. The main thing is today, and as far as we know through all of history, because there's a huge long history of fasting, people have been doing it without huge recorded numbers of deaths here and there and disasters there. It's built into our DNA, really it is. It's just important maybe to make one distinction, and that is between starvation and fasting. If you continue to fast for a month or two, assuming you started at a healthy physical condition, then you will reach the point of starvation. If you starve yourself, you will die. But fasting isn't about that. And as long as you consider fasting within that framework, it really is an extremely safe thing to do. Fasting can be uncomfortable at times. But does that mean it's dangerous? Something which is uncomfortable has nothing to do with whether it's dangerous. The reason it's important to bring this up is to do with detox symptoms. The vast majority of people do experience detox symptoms, at least on their first few fasts, and that may mean headaches, nausea, muscle aches, basically any symptom that you might get when you have the flu, you can get when you're water fasting. And this is basically because when you have the flu, your body is detoxing and cleansing from the virus. When you're water fasting, you're detoxing and cleansing from the accumulation of toxins in your system. In terms of the symptoms, they can be very, very similar. But is it dangerous to be fighting the flu? Is the runny nose, is the headache of a flu dangerous? No, of course not. It's simply uncomfortable. And it's very important to keep this in mind. The only real time that a fast becomes dangerous is when we allow our brain to dictate what we think is best for our body. If we just allow our body to get on with things, if we just pay attention to the signs which our body is giving us, things are going to be okay. Now let me give you just a couple of examples here. One thing which can be dangerous during a fast is hyperhydration. So logically, it makes sense that if we're cleansing, we need water to flush things out. Therefore, surely we should be drinking a lot of water. And if you go onto the internet, again, you can find all sorts of crazy things. I've seen multiple instances where you'll find advice saying you should be drinking at least 7 or 8 quarts, 7 or 8 liters, that's nearly 2 gallons of water a day. 2 gallons of water a day. And the thing is, there does come a point beyond which, if you drink too much, yes, you'll be washing out the toxins, but you'll also be washing out the good stuff too. You'll be washing out mineral salts from your blood, and those mineral salts, called electrolytes, are important. And you need them in order to regulate a healthy metabolism. The solution here isn't to load up on electrolytes. You can find all sorts of crazy stuff about that as well. The solution is to pay attention to your thirst. Just pay attention to what your body is telling you to do and follow that, and you'll be okay. Another time that fasting can become dangerous is that if it's giving you severe signs that something is not okay. So, for instance, fasting can easily cause nausea, as I've mentioned before. It will come, it'll go. But if you experience sustained nausea, sustained vomiting, you need to pay attention to that. And there may come a time when you need to cool off a fast. This happens very, very rarely. But there may come a time when, due to excessive vomiting, you need to stop. But besides this, if you just follow your body, yes, you may be uncomfortable at times, but it's not going to be dangerous. So fasting is safe for the vast, vast, vast majority of people. But there are certain categories which may involve danger, and it's important to be aware of these. And these basically concern medical conditions. And if you suffer from a medical condition, if you're planning on doing a fast in order to address a medical condition, it's very important to discuss this first with your doctor, get their advice, and along with your doctor to work with a fasting specialist. So the first category of potential problems concerns cardiac issues. During a fast, your heart does work harder. Again, think of the flu. When you've got the flu, there are times when you can feel your heart is pounding, right? It's working hard to get your circulation going to flush out the toxins, in this case, the virus. The same thing in a water fast. Almost anyone who does a fast of longer than a day or two will experience periods in which their heart feels very much like the flu. It's pounding stronger, it's pounding faster than usual. And if you have a weak heart, potentially this could push you over the edge. It's important to discuss that with your doctor. Now, there's another situation which can affect the heart beyond simply a weak heart. And that again returns to the question of mineral salts and electrolytes. So in order to regulate heart function, specifically levels of potassium, magnesium, and phosphate are important. You need to keep those in balance. And so if you reach the point of flushing these out of your system through excessive drinking, if you undertake a fast which is so long, and again, we're talking about several months here usually, that you reach the point that you run into potential electrolyte imbalance, that eventually will lead to impacting on your heart. In this kind of a situation, it's not that suddenly you get a cardiac arrest and poof, you die. There's a whole range of symptoms which precede this, but ultimately, if you ignore those symptoms, you do run the risk of cardiac failure. I'm not going to lie to you. That ultimately can happen in very extreme circumstances. Beyond cardiac issues, diabetes is pretty well known as being a situation in which you have to be very careful when you're water fasting. If you have type 1 diabetes, you'll often find the advice, simply do not water fast, it's dangerous. And in many cases, this is absolutely true. And this is because the pancreas simply isn't secreting insulin to the degree that you need. And that is potentially dangerous during a water fast. Having said that though, there are certain cases, depending on the severity of the type 1 diabetes, in which water fasting, when applied judiciously, very carefully, under supervision, is not only safe, but it can be beneficial. in certain circumstances. But it's very, very important to discuss this with a doctor before undertaking any kind of a fast with type 1 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes, which is much more common, it's the kind we usually think about, basically concerns insulin resistance. It means that the body has learned not to respond to insulin rather not respond to the changes in blood sugars, and therefore insulin is not produced in the required quantities. And this is where fasting actually, again, done very carefully, can do a huge amount of good. You can heal yourself from type 2 diabetes in many cases. And this is because fasting provides a hormonal reset. If you reset your hormones, you reset your sensitivity to blood sugar. It's that simple. In this general category, also, I guess we could apply just generally hypoglycemia, which concerns basically low blood sugar levels. And a lot of people will come saying, I can't possibly water fast, I have hypoglycemia. Again, if this is the case, you need to talk to your doctor. But first of all, there are a lot of cases where people believe they have hypoglycemia and they actually don't. I've had people come saying, I can't fast, I tried it and I get dizzy, I almost black out. But when you look at the specifics, it's clearly not a question of low blood sugar levels, it's withdrawal symptoms to caffeine. I'm thinking of a particular case. Caffeine withdrawal symptoms do often look a little bit like low blood sugar levels. And more generally speaking, even if you do have true hypoglycemia, as long as you're careful, as long as you approach fasting carefully, there's no reason why you can't actually help heal yourself from it. Now, there are also certain medications, certain drugs, which make fasting potentially dangerous. So any drug which causes severe and potentially with dangerous withdrawal symptoms in its own right means that when you water fast, those symptoms will come on much more powerfully because your body is in a state of cleansing. So for instance, alcohol. If you're an alcoholic and you suddenly just cut short, cold turkey, you're drinking, then that is potentially dangerous in everyday life. The last thing you would want to do in a situation like this is water fast on top of it. It's simply going to be too powerful. I can't think of any alcoholics who have ever suddenly jumped into a water fast like that, but theoretically, it could be a problem. The same applies to antidepressants. There are certain categories of antidepressant which do carry very severe withdrawal symptoms with it. And again, water fasting simply is going to intensify those to the point that it could potentially become dangerous. It makes much more sense in a situation like this to carefully wean yourself off the antidepressants before the water fast or potentially during the water fast, if that is what is advisable. And again, please work with a doctor along with a fasting specialist in any kind of case like this. I've mentioned antidepressants. This kind of brings up the question of psychological imbalances in general. And again, this is where water fasting can be quite a tricky subject because eating is very much related to emotion. It's not that we're simply hungry and we eat to fulfill our hunger. No, we eat for comfort, we eat for a sense of well-being and love in many cases. And when you take away food, that can upset our emotional needs. Now, if you're already in a sensitive situation because of a psychological imbalance, water fasting can make that much more intense. So again, you need to be very careful. Having said that though, so many psychological imbalances are also caused by hormonal imbalances. And again, I've mentioned this kind of hormonal reset, which can take place during a water fast and does take place. And as a result, water fasting actually can be a way to help relieve the situation, to heal yourself from certain psychological imbalances. I mean, just recently, I've had someone who finished a 40-day water fast who was working with me. They weren't fasting in order to deal with depression, but he was on antidepressants, and he just noticed that he came off the antidepressants during the fast and hasn't had any need to go back to them since then. For me, I think the most striking example of this is the way that in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, that fasting was actually used in order to heal schizophrenia. I mean, here we are, one of the most severe mental illnesses, and fasting was used successfully in certain cases to treat the schizophrenia. Okay, finally, there are a very small number of very rare metabolic disorders, illnesses, which more or less make fasting impossible. What usually happens is that the body is simply unable to make the switch towards ketosis and fat burning. If you can't do that, you can't fast. It's that simple. But if you do happen to be one of the incredibly small number of people who suffer from such a disorder, and you probably don't know that you do because, of course, you've not been in the situation of having to test it out, then the body will give very, very clear signs that something is going wrong. And it's not that you're going to drop down dead all of a sudden. No, you're going to get very, very severe symptoms. Again, I've mentioned constant vomiting. This is something you need to watch out for. If you experience anything like this, where your body is reacting violently to the fast, then you need to stop. But again, for the vast, vast majority of people, fasting is completely safe. Generally speaking, the most dangerous thing about a fast isn't the fast itself, it's what follows, breaking the fast and the process of refeeding. So the most dangerous situation concerns what is known as refeeding syndrome. And this is something which takes place only after extended fasts. Really, the danger begins at around 10 to 14 days. And after that, you just need to be extra careful. What takes place is as the body comes out of ketosis, out of the fat burning mechanism, it has to shift the way that potassium, magnesium, and phosphate, I've mentioned those minerals before in relation to the heart, the way those minerals are distributed in the body and on a cellular level as well. And if you make the shift back towards eating too soon, those minerals aren't going to be in the right place, and it can lead to a variety of symptoms which ultimately lead to, as I mentioned, cardiac failure. We've all heard, I think, of in cases of malnourishment, that if someone is incredibly emaciated, if you feed them too fast after that situation, they can die. That's exactly what's taking place here. Now, the thing again, you're not suddenly going to die of cardiac failure. There's a whole series of symptoms which gradually accumulate, and if you ignore them, there'll be a problem. I would argue that actually probably a lot of people who do any kind of fast of more than 10 or 14 days often experience, if they're not careful and if they do it unsupervised, the surface level symptoms of refeeding syndrome, which usually includes edema, mild muscle cramps. Besides this, one other danger of refeeding too quickly is that instead of building your body up healthily, you end up putting on too much fat too soon. Now, we're not talking simply about obesity here. We're talking about the way that fat builds up. And if you eat too much too soon after a fast, excuse me, then that fat is going to accumulate around the inner organs. And it's basically proven that there is an association between fat around inner organs and chronic disease. So you need to be careful about that. But again, this is something where you have to really take it to extremes for it to be a problem. Finally, in terms of the refeeding situation, you need to watch out for digestive situations, digestive issues. Generally speaking, this isn't dangerous, it's just uncomfortable, but it can persist. You simply don't want to put too much food into your body before your body is ready to accept it. Okay, so if you look at it fundamentally, actually, eating is much more dangerous than fasting. Simply in the context of a fast, it's the period after a fast which is the most dangerous. But in everyday life as well, eating is more dangerous than fasting. The number of deaths which have happened through fasting, you can probably number on one hand in the last 100 years. The number of deaths caused through eating, millions and millions and millions every year. Overeating causes obesity. It can cause diabetes, which itself is a major cause of death. Bad eating habits are also associated with certain types of cancer. Eating the wrong kinds of food are associated with high cholesterol levels, cardiovascular problems, heart attacks. You're much more likely to die from a heart attack because you've not been eating well than if you do a fast. So, taken from this perspective, quite honestly, fasting is the safest possible thing you can do.